Why would I use UploadThing? Isn't that just a wrapper of S3? Why would I use S3? Isn't that just a wrapper over hard drives and different server farms? Why would I use a server farm? Isn't that just a wrapper over the server that I could put in my closet? Why would I use Linux? Isn't that just a wrapper? You get the idea. Depending on where you live and what layer in the stack you exist, everything starts to look like a wrapper. This isn't a new thing. I'm not suddenly spitting like 2 chains out here because the world's changing. The reason that everything's a wrapper is because we improve technology over time. I can't believe I have to make this video, but I feel like it's become necessary because people seem to think wrappers are bad and examples of software not improving, when in reality, almost every major improvement we've seen to software over the last 30 plus years has in many ways just been a wrapper. So if you want to watch me defend Java, talk shit on AWS, and explain in detail why I think T3 Chat is a better product than OpenAI, then sit around because we have to pay some bills really quick. Recently, I've loved building one-off apps quickly with tools like Bolt, V0, and Lovable, but there's a couple things they don't do right. One in particular they all seem to struggle a lot with is auth. It's weirdly easy to build an application from scratch, and it's weirdly hard to just get a sign-in button working. Unless you're using today's sponsor, Clerk. Clerk is still the easiest way to get auth set up properly without having to worry about managing it, deploying it, and keeping it up to date and clogging up your user table. Whether or not you end up using Clerk, take my word for it, the sooner you can get the user table out of your database and manage auth in a different service or microservice of some form, the better. It has made my life so much easier, and I never thought that would be the case. But that's far from the only thing Clerk does that makes my life easier. The fact they have a whole component library built in so you can just have good UI for everything from the sign-in button to the actual user profile stuff to managing everything from orgs to invites for the users of your stuff. It's really good. Seriously though, if you're using Next.js and you don't have auth set up, I cannot make a better recommendation than Clerk. It's comically easy. You install a package, you pull Clerk middleware into the middleware TS file. You just export default Clerk middleware, throw in this config if you want to skip other things you don't want to have validated. You hop into your layouts, you wrap your app with the Clerk provider, then you just throw the sign in and sign up buttons wherever you want to use them. And if you have things you only want to render when signed in, wrap them in the signed in component. If you have things you only want to render on signed out, wrap them in the signed out component. And that user button, that's the fancy little menu that when you click has all the information for the user so they could sign out, see what email address they're using, configure their profile, all that just built in. For those of y'all with enterprise cases, they just removed all of the SSO fees. You know the famous SSO tax, the wall of shame, making fun of all the companies that charge way too much when you turn on SSO? They don't. And they're an auth company. They're the one that you would expect to have doing that. Generally speaking, their pricing is super fair too, especially when you consider the fact that they don't count people who only signed in once and then didn't come back 24 hours later against your monthly active users. So you never have to worry about a huge spike in traffic where nobody converts, costing you a bunch of money because those users just don't count towards your numbers. It's great. It's such a nice thing, and I wish more companies would do stuff like this. It's really, really nice. If you need auth, check them out today at soydev.link/clerk. This is one of those videos that I'm going to get in trouble for, and I don't care because this is an important take y'all need to hear. I need to be fully transparent. There's one particular reason this is coming up. T3 Chat. In case you're somehow here without knowing, I'd be impressed. T3 Chat is an AI chat app that I built because I was not happy with the existing ones. Not that the models were bad. Claude and most of the stuff going on at OpenAI, in particular the O series models, are awesome. The problem was that their UIs aren't very good. Chances are I've already put out the video where I roast all of their UIs by now. If not, keep an eye out for it. The point is that I wasn't happy with this layer. The important thing to understand is that the website is a wrapper. The ChatGPT site, chatgpt.com, is a wrapper for all the different AI models that OpenAI puts out. My layer with T3 Chat is a different wrapper for all of those things. We're all wrapping the model and its behaviors. The quality of these wrappers is what matters. And T3 Chat is not the first time I have written one of these wrappers. If we go to my company, my startup Ping's homepage here, we have 4 things here. We have T3 Chat, which is a wrapper of all of these LLMs. We have UploadThing, which is kind of a wrapper of S3 and R2 and a bunch of other hybrid things that we're doing. We have PicThing, which is a wrapper of a couple different background removal services for image management, as well as, funny enough, a wrapper around UploadThing. And Ping.gg, which is a wrapper around a handful of WebRTC providers to provide really high quality HD video calls for creators to do live collaboration. All of these tools are wrappers, but I would challenge you to show me any tool that isn't, because in the end, everything is kind of a wrapper. If we go all the way down to the lowest levels in our computers, they'll look something like this. But that's not the lowest you can go, because each of these ones and zeros represents silicon that has specific values in it, depending on whether or not it is in an on state. So we represent this by wrapping it with binary that shows the value that exists in the processor. We then invented a language to interface with this called assembly. Assembly is a syntax for us to access the values and the registers and all the things as they are defined in our device, in our memory, in our systems. Imagine if when C came out, you were to respond, why would I ever use C? Isn't that just a crappy wrapper for assembly? I should just write the assembly code myself. And if you said that, you would either be the developer of Roller Coaster Tycoon, the developer of FFmpeg, or wrong. Yeah. The benefit of C isn't just that it's easier to write than assembly. It actually goes a bit further. The benefit of C is that there wasn't just one assembly. There was MIPS. There was also other assemblies, like x86 assembly. Or nowadays, we have ARM assembly. And the benefit that we all forget about when we pretend C doesn't need to exist is that having one layer like C allows us to have this one layer support all sorts of different things at the same time. We have this one giant shared abstraction that is just a wrapper, but it's just a wrapper for ARM assembly, as well as for MIPS, as well as for x86. This wrapper is valuable both because it meaningfully improves the developer experience we have working in the code, because the code is easier to read, easier to write, easier to review, easier to maintain, and it means we have a simpler portable layer that we can use to port things to different assembly types. That is a massive win. I don't care how good you are at writing assembly, having a shared language like this that works across all these different platforms is so valuable that Java only existed to push it even further. The goal of Java was to be an abstraction that lets you run the same code and have the same application experience on top of things that were even more unalike than we have here, like the weird obtuse platforms for BlackBerry or for other crappy smartphones back in the day, for embedding things into your web pages. Java was incredible for having code that you could write, not even have to recompile, because here at the very least with C, now I have to take my code, my C code, and recompile it to spit out assembly that is compatible for all of these different platforms. Java, as a higher level abstraction, can just target C effectively because C has had a runtime written in it for Java for all the different places you might want to put it. So as long as there's a Java runtime for the platform you're targeting, you don't even need to compile. You just throw the code over to that runtime and it handles it. And that is magical. And the magic isn't just because the code works in multiple places, only writing it once. The magic is you can swap out these abstractions. We have here the Java runtime. The Java runtime is pretty good. It's not great, but it is, especially for its time, it was fucking incredible. But there have been a lot of developments to make faster Java runtimes. One of the biggest innovations in the Java world was Graal, which is a faster runtime that will work great with your Java code. And you can kind of just swap out your runtime to Graal or whatever other changes happen in the runtime layer to make your code better, faster, more portable, and more. Since this abstraction exists, there's a lot of things you can do in that abstract layer that allow for the place that your user's code lives to be better. And that's awesome because this abstraction makes Java, at least theoretically, easier to write. We had to learn a lot of lessons. But it also means this layer can have improvements that don't require you to change either side that allow for both sides to see meaningful wins. And this goes for lots of technologies. This also goes for React, for example. React Native is a syntax that feels and works just like React, but it has to have a really complex binding layer to those native behaviors. That binding layer has changed significantly over the last 10 years, and is now at the point where it's way faster, and for the most part, you can just bump the version of your React Native package and get these massive performance wins. You could make the counter argument that those things are only necessary because the performance wasn't ideal in the first place, but I would say, yeah, there's nothing faster than an app that doesn't exist because it's so much harder to write. So now let's bring this over to what we're actually here to talk about, which is T3 chat. T3 chat is an abstraction over the Vercel AI SDK, which is an abstraction over the Open AI SDK standard, which is about as standard as S3's API. And if you think S3's API is standard, go try to build your own UploadThing on something else. I promise you, it's not standard. It's standard in the most vague sense at best. But because we have the OpenAI SDK standard, that is what Vercel's AI SDK is building on top of, any AI LLM provider can just support that OpenAI standard. Like, I don't know, OpenAI obviously does. But also, you guys might have heard of a company called Anthropic. Or maybe if you're really tuned in, DeepSeek, or if you hang out here enough, Grok with a Q, not a K. There's a difference. But what's cool here is because we are operating through the Vercel AI SDK as our abstraction layer, we now have a single syntax, a single way of working with these providers that allows for us to support all of them, which we do. When I say we support all the models, I pretty much mean it. By the time this video comes out, there might be more. There almost certainly will be, knowing how our schedule is right now. But all of these models can be supported because we have an abstraction on top. Are we just wrapping all of these things? Kind of, yeah. But by being a wrapper around the right thing, we can now provide a better experience, more portability, and most importantly, more options for our users. It is not a bad thing to be a wrapper. One more fun example, the one everybody used originally to shit on us for not knowing what we're doing, UploadThing. UploadThing is quite the wrapper because UploadThing is a file storage solution. And the UploadThing package doesn't wrap S3, it wraps the UploadThing infra. And the UploadThing infra is pretty complex. We have our own ingest, and our ingest server has to handle a lot of different things. It has to wrap our database layer, keep that up to date. It has to handle the files coming in, keep that in a local state, usually through something like Redis, just in case the user has issues uploading and has to stop and restart, they lose internet, any of those types of issues. There's a lot of them, they suck. This now has to be served somewhere, and yes, we are serving them by default through S3. But S3 is not the best place for your files a lot of the time. If your files are being accessed often enough, the egress costs on S3 are unbelievably high. So we keep some files, when they hit certain thresholds, on Cloudflare R2. If we didn't have an abstraction like UploadThing, it would be basically impossible for us to do the right thing on a per file basis like we can right now. If you were to just use S3 directly, it would cost you more money if you're doing actual traffic, because serving those files directly through S3 is expensive. And if you're not, then you yourself are wrapping S3 with your own CloudFormation calls, your own handling of that cache layer. You can't just hit S3. If you're not using CloudFront or some other cache in front, you're screwed. But if you let us handle that, not only are you not screwed and we'll handle it for you, we'll also handle optimizations that you can't without leaving the cloud. You'd have to leave S3 and leave AWS if you wanted to really min-max your cost, performance, and overall characteristics of your file system. R2 is slower. R2 is more expensive to hold your files, but it is a lot cheaper to serve them once they're being held. So optimizing where the files go, depending on the characteristics of how they're being accessed, is an abstraction that you can only do as a wrapper. Being a wrapper is enabling us to do things that you couldn't if you weren't. So not only is wrapping your stuff better because of the flexibility of where you can go with it after, the ability to change and make changes, it also enables powerful behaviors that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. The same way that Java is able to have its code run in multiple environments with no changes, in the same way that T3 chat lets us have different model providers all supported without changes, UploadThing allows us to put our files in the most optimal places, say it with me, chat, without changes. Abstractions are good. Wrappers are what power all of the tools and technologies we use. If you were to look at a stack trace and see just how deep any program you're using goes in terms of the different things it is wrapping, you'd realize that making fun of web devs for wrapping browser standards with better APIs is very, very silly, because the average package you're using in something like Rust is wrapping 15 plus layers of crap going all the way down to the native layer. And these wrappers are good. It is an awesome thing that the tools we use today are so well packaged and bundled and wrapped that for the most part, devs don't have to go down to these lower levels anymore. As tools like Java get better, the need for tools that are more complex goes down. And what you'll see over time is as these abstractions get better and better, you have to care about less and less. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It doesn't mean we can't optimize it in certain ways, but there has been no innovation in the bottom section here in a very long time. There has not been a meaningful innovation in how we process assembly code and the way that we store binary values. We might have quantum someday, probably not, but someday. We effectively aren't innovating at that layer anymore. The next layer up with C, we are innovating some amount with tools like Rust, and it's very good to see that because it needs the innovation. But up until recently, that layer wasn't even being touched, and we were kind of living in this runtime world where that was the level of abstraction that we are working in and fighting with and innovating around every day. And that's not a bad thing. We didn't do this because we're terrible, evil devs that are so stupid that we don't want to learn C. We did this because working in this abstraction layer is more productive. There are so many great engineers that built the tools that live in this lower area that don't work in them anymore, that have moved up the stack because they care more about shipping good software than they care about flexing the fact that they know the difference between MIPS assembly and x86 assembly. Good devs don't fight to live in a specific box forever. Good devs move up and down depending on where they need to be for the thing they're trying to build. The devs who say you should live here are just as bad as the devs who say you should live here. You should go where it makes sense for the thing that you're doing. And for most people, building applications that are user-facing, living inside of C makes no sense at all, which is why, for better or worse, there are now a lot of devs that can't see below this level. Do I think that's bad? Kind of. It'd be nice if more devs understood how deep these things go so they can understand why certain things do or don't work and why they should or shouldn't do things in certain ways. But you should run into those problems. And if you're not running into those problems, then does it really matter how well you know the things underneath? Abstractions are good. Wrappers are great. And if you're thinking about this in business terms, something like T3 chat has a much stickier experience than OpenAI or Anthropic because they still have to build all of this themselves. If we're looking at the OpenAI site is wrapping their models, but it's wrapping them in a much smaller way. What you end up with is something like this. And now, each of these is going to have to wrap it in its own special way because the wrapper isn't just like a thing we did for fun. A wrapper is a necessary abstraction to make these parts work properly. And it's silly to look at this and say, yeah, you're just selling a wrapper. You should use a real service like chatgpt.com. It's the exact same fucking thing. I'll never understand it's just a wrapper because depending on when you asked and where you live, C was just a wrapper too. And now people say, why are you just using all those wrappers? You could write that in C. Or even funnier, why are you using something like Kotlin? You could just write the Java yourself. No. The reason these wrappers exist are because we need things that the native layers aren't providing, and we want abstractions so we don't have to rely on any specific native layer. Abstractions are good. Wrappers are good. Stop complaining about these if you don't understand them. And if you have examples of wrappers that are bad, let me know. Because from my experience, it's not that wrapping was bad, it's that the developers who built the wrapper were bad or had a bad incentive or goal when they wrote it. For the most part, wrappers represent meaningful improvements in the developer experience that we have every day, and we shouldn't talk shit on them like the word wrapper is somehow magically just a bad word. I've never understood it. I never will. It's wrappers all the way down. The only reason you can bitch about wrappers is because you picked somewhere to draw a line and you drew that line and said, okay, everything above this line is a crappy wrapper. Everything below this line is real. But when you draw that line, you're implicitly saying C isn't a wrapper, but Java is? Yeah? It's just nonsense. It's just absolute nonsense. I don't care. T3 chat is a very successful service because we built a good wrapper for the sets of tools, technologies, and models that exist. UploadThing's a good service because we are wrapping AWS S3 and R2 in ways that are much easier to digest, integrate, maintain, and scale. These wrappers are awesome, and I build them for a reason. They solve real problems. And I would love for somebody to show me alternatives or competing services that aren't similar wrappers with less flexibility, because the wrappers that I build are better, more flexible ways to solve real problems that I and others have. As Littlefinger just said here, there can be bad wrappers, but they are not bad because they are wrappers. They're bad because they do not work well. Yes, people you talk to would define a wrapper as something that provides no additional abstraction. I would challenge those people to show me a single wrapper that is the case for. Because if that is how they're using the term wrapper, they're just using the term wrapper as an abstraction that I don't understand. Because if you can't see the value in why someone would wrap something a certain way, then it's not for you. Just move on. If the only argument you have against something is that it is a wrapper, you are complimenting the thing because you couldn't find anything else wrong with it. If the problem with the tool is that it's just a wrapper, it's not a problem. It just means you don't understand the thing. If you want to bitch about services like T3 Chat or UploadThing or the many similar wrappers that many others have made, you should figure out how to give actual constructive complaints, because saying it's just a wrapper is saying you don't understand it. And I am so tired of this complaint that now y'all had to listen to me complain about it for however long we just did. The difference between me and those people is that I could actually concretely form a thought about what is wrong with those people. And what's wrong with them is their brain isn't fully developed. I have nothing else to say about these people. They can go back to polishing their Arch Linux configs and not ever shipping software, because I know the exact type of person who makes these complaints, and they are not real developers. And if you're dealing with one of those people complaining about some wrapper that they don't want to use, send them this video and make sure they know this end part is for them. Okay, that's all I have. And until next time, keep wrapping software.